Thanks, Kylie.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Linton. I'm the Secretary of the MLTAV, and we are very privileged to have Eleanor, who is an absolute goldmine of information about using languages, using home languages, EAL. She's doing her PhD. She's on the MLTAV committee, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say because I learned heaps from the last presentation that she did. So thank you for choosing to join us this afternoon, and I'm going to hand over to Eleanor.
Oh, thank you, Linton, and welcome to this webinar. I have a feeling that maybe someone else will be joining soon, so I'm going to start slowly, and maybe I will try to, welcome people if they are coming in a few minutes after. But I think we are ready to start. As Linton said, my name is Elena Pirovano. My experience with EAL students, I'm going to share my experience with you with EAL students, but basically I've been for 10 years a teacher of Italian in primary schools here in Victoria. And that's where the passion about including EAL students in the languages classroom started. And as Linton was saying, I'm now doing my PhD in a field that is very close to this one. So the idea this afternoon is to share with you my understanding of EAL students in the languages classroom and some resources that you may find useful in your teaching practice. But before we start, I would like to ask you a couple of questions about yourself and your experience with EAL students, just to get to know each other a little bit. I see this webinar as a starting point, starting a conversation about EAL students in the languages classroom. I don't know you very well. We don't know each other. It's a starting point with some general understanding and ideas around EAL students that maybe become more in-depth understanding and sharing in the future. But for now, I'm going to share with you my slides, and I want to start with a couple of questions, and you are more than welcome to turn on your microphone and respond to these questions for everyone, or type into the chat. Okay, so just to give me an idea, are you teaching in a primary or secondary context? What language are you teaching? And if you can give me a brief, just a sentence or two about your perception of EAL students in your school community and in your classes. And with this, I mean, in your classes, do you have a large number of EAL students? For example, if your classes are made of 20, 25 students, do you have more than 10 EAL students in each class? You have some in each class, or you have just some students around the school that are also involved in the languages classroom? Okay, give me an idea and then we start. Feel free to open your microphone, or I'm gonna open the chat. Okay, primary, secondary, Chinese. Okay, so thank you. So roughly, I'm reading Kevin, about 20 students that are EAL involved in the Mandarin Chinese program. French, just a few. Anyone, I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can see you. Anyone wants to add anything by opening the microphone and share? You're more than welcome to do so.
Can I just say, my name is Ruth. I'm a librarian in a primary school. I don't teach EAL students, but I am the incoming manager of the Lemurk Library in Melbourne. And so I just wanted to attend today to get a bit more, learn some more things. So, and to meet all of you in case you want to come to my library, my new library.
Oh, welcome, Ruth. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. reading through in the chat, approximately 2 to 5 students per year level. Yeah. Okay, so we have different experiences, but most of us are primary school teacher. I've been primary school teacher here in Australia. Excellent. Oh, hi, Brigitte. I remember we already met in the previous webinar. Okay, great. Any other comments that you want to add? A few in each year level. Excellent. Okay, one more activity before we start. I'm going to share with you Poll Everywhere link. If you can go into this link, paulev.com and my name, Elena Pirovano. And if you can, identify one word that would describe your experience with your EAL students. I'm going to just try to visualize how we feel about being with EAL students in the languages classroom. So you can choose an adjective, you can choose a noun, you can choose a verb, whatever it makes you, or it helps us to visualize your experience with your EAL students. Okay? Or if there's a link in the chat.
So yeah,
Thank you,
I put the
Linton.
link in the chat for
Yeah.
everybody. And I've jumped into there, Elena.
Is it
and
working?
It says waiting for Elena Pirovana's presentation to begin. Do you need to present that?
That's sweet. I'm gonna start. I thought I did it, but sorry. Activate. Oh no.
Yeah, that's helped. Now it's come.
Is it working?
Yes, that's good.
I have a feeling. Activate. Present. Okay. Should be working now. If you have just joined the webinar, welcome. We are just trying to know a little bit each other. So if you want to type in the chat, if you are a primary or secondary school, in a primary or secondary school, what language are you teaching? And we are just writing in, typing in this Poll Everywhere link, one word with that you would use to define your experience with EAL students in only one word.
Sorry to interrupt. I've just arrived. Yes. Is the link? Do we just type that in from the top, or if it was sent in the chat before, I don't have access to it? Is it just? Is it just what's at the top, the pollev.com?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
it
perfect.
Is.
I'll just copy that.
And it's again in the chat if you.
Oh, thank you.
It's already been. It's been posted.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
No worries. Okay, excellent. Oh, I'm gonna wait one more minute and then I'm gonna take a snapshot of this, and we might go back and look at it at the end of the webinar. So we have work, challenging, skilled, interesting, tricky, positive, goldmine, advance, hard. I'm gonna take a screenshot of this. Oh, that's more thoughtful. Thank you so much. It's going to be open, this page, for the whole webinar. So in case you want to add something else, you can do. We can go back to this and maybe have another look. But for now, we're going to start from here, from these, I feel a bit the same. I feel like there's a bit of both, a bit of a, exciting and positive and goldmine and interesting, and a bit of hard work, challenging and tricky. So let's see if by sharing some ideas today, we can, find a place for these EAL students in our classes. I'm going to start with, thank you so much for your contribution. We are going to go back to those later on, but I'm going to start now with a quick outline of what we're doing this afternoon. So we're going to start from trying to defining EAL students, and in particular in the languages classroom. I'm going to share with you some resources that might be useful in your teaching practice, hopefully, not only to inform your choices in teaching practice, but also maybe to help you to advocate for EAL students in the languages classroom and in the whole school community. Then I'm going to move on to something a bit more classroom-based. So a couple of foundational concepts about teaching students that have access to multiple languages that don't come only from an English background, but from multiple languages in their life, in their experiences, and some examples in the classroom. I'm going to start with some definitions that I heard and I found about EAL students. Now, if you have your video on, or if you want in the chat, put your hands up or your thumbs up in the chat if you ever heard these definitions. EAL students have no language, they don't have enough language, they can't read, they can't write, they are illiterate, they are not able to participate in the class life, and they can't express themselves. I see that, Madeleine, you have heard these definitions as I had. In my experience, many times I heard I see some others hands up. I heard some of my colleagues, and especially my mainstream classroom teachers, defining EAL students in this way. And this can be defined as a monolingual view. So they have no English language. They may not have enough English language. They may not be able to read and write in English, or to fully participate in the classroom in English. But what about if we look at EAL students from a different perspective? And this is some of the definitions that I found to look at EAL students from a different point of view. EAL students may have one or more home or heritage languages. So they may bring to the classroom languages that they use in their family contexts, or languages that they hear every day, their parents or their family friends using. Even if they may not be able to use it themselves, they may be exposed to these languages and having receptive understanding of these languages. They may have a knowledge of English, although at different levels of proficiency, maybe not enough to fully take advantage of what's happening in the classroom, but they may have a little understanding of English. They also may have other languages that they have learned through life experience, through migration patterns, traveling, or school experience, languages that they have learned in previous schooling before arriving to Australia. And we can't forget the language they are currently learning. So the language that we are teaching them in the languages class. So what we usually define as the target language. So in this vision, in this view of EAL students, which I define as a plurilingual view, we can see that students are not lacking something, or are not see in a deficit perspective, but we look at them trying to find and understand what they actually bring to the languages classroom. So the first thing that I want to share with you is, I think my position is we need to bring this new perspective, maybe not new, I mean, it's quite a while that this perspective is around, but we need to invite our school community to shift from a monolingual view to a plurilingual view of EAL students. So specifically in the languages classroom, we need to be ready to move from a target language only kind of environment to acknowledging and maybe leveraging also their other languages, and moving from defining EAL students based on what they can't do, they lack, and moving to what they have, and they can bring to the languages classroom. So this is the first thing that I really would like to invite you to reflect on, and to put at the foundation of your view of EAL students in your languages classroom. So what can we do from here once we have this understanding? One of the things that I really value is that the first step is to know the languages and the linguistic and literacy practices of our students. And with this, I mean, it's not enough to ask our students, what languages do you speak? It's a question that sometimes it's difficult for some of our students, may not be relevant and may not tell us what we really need to know about our students. So my suggestion is that, first of all, we need to start avoiding any kind of assumptions about the linguistic skills of our students, especially assumptions that are related to their cultural or family background. So sometimes it happens sometimes with me. You have an Italian name, your parents speak Italian, you must learn, you must be a speaker of Italian. Yes and no, maybe. So let's try to, rather than starting from assumptions, do an actual investigation of what our students do with languages. So actively investigating their linguistic competence in their other languages, which is not, as I said, only asking what languages do you speak, because especially in primary school, it's a difficult question for some students. And look, and we have different experiences and different history with languages. I'll give you a very brief example. If you ask me, what is your mother tongue, or what languages do you speak? I know. My mother tongue is Italian. I was born, all my education, I had all my education in Italy. That's the language I feel more comfortable with, and I learned English when I was already an adult. So English, yes, it's a language I can use in my personal and professional life, but it's definitely less strong than Italian. But if you ask my children, they were born not in Italy, not in Australia. They speak Italian, they're fluent. If they go to Italy, they can, in some way camouflage. They look like Italians. If they're here, they can camouflage. They look like Australian. But if I ask them, what is your mother tongue? They're not sure. They're not sure, because it's the first language that they've been exposed to has been Italian, but they feel more comfortable with English because they've been educated in English. And imagine students that come from places where multiple languages or dialects are spoken. I remember in my experience in a primary school in the western suburbs of Melbourne, with a very strong EAL presence, so students that were coming mainly from South Asia, but a bit from everywhere. And I remember some students that could speak 3 or 4 different Indian languages, plus English, plus they were exposed to Italian. So the point that I want to make is, we need to find different tools to understand what languages our students have in their repertoires, but most of all, what they do with these languages. And that's why I'm talking about linguistic and literacy practices. So we need to understand what they use the language for and with. For example, they use some languages with the family, some other languages with friends, some other languages for shopping, some other languages at school, and so on. But also how they are able to use these languages, if they have, an oral kind of competence, or if they can read and write in other languages, or if they have a receptive knowledge of some languages, and for some others, it's just, an understanding or being exposed to. And my suggestion is rather than using questioning and verbal ways of investigating these competencies, using what I call multimodal linguistic biography. I don't go into much detail, but some of these strategies are, for example, language maps or language portraits, or these are the images that you can see on the screen. If you're interested in knowing more, you can go and check the link. We did another webinar at MLTAV a couple of months ago, maybe 3, about multilingual speakers in the languages classroom, and there's a couple of slides, and there's also a recording where you can have, maybe a better understanding of how to use multimodal linguistic biographies. But the point is, by using images, colors, drawings, different kind of modality to talk about languages, we can achieve a better understanding of what our students do with the languages. So first step, know the linguistic repertoires and practices of our students. Second step, I think we need to create inclusive languages programs. How we do this? I'm going to share with you just a few resources that you can find available for free in the internet that may be relevant to your context. The first one I'm going to show you are a series of brochures developed by the University of Melbourne. And the last one that we worked on is understanding EAL students in our languages programs. This is the link where you can download these brochures, you can print them out, and I think they are really useful for you as teachers to have, some clear points that you can use to advocate for your EAL students and for having them in your languages classes, but can also be very useful to share with your colleagues and with the families, with your students' families. They are all in English, but for some of them, they are available also translated in some main community languages like Arabic or Chinese or some other languages. So this one, the first one that I want to talk about is it shares some resource evidence-based information about EAL students and how important it is for these students to be in a languages classroom, not to be, sometimes some schools decide that they need to focus only on English. So they disappear from your languages programs because we want them to focus on English only. This brochure helps you to understand, why this is not a wise decision. I'm going to share just quickly this page, but there are a couple of other pages where you can find, what the research says about the benefits of having EAL students in the languages classroom. For example, they tend to demonstrate greater ability to learn additional languages. They start learning the additional language at the same level as their peers. And this is really important, especially because often EAL students feel like they are not good enough. They can't, they're always the ones that need help. We can flip this in the languages classroom. Sometimes, or we can use some strategies to make sure that EAL students are experts in our languages classroom. And we're going to look at some strategies later on. Teachers can also use EAL students' knowledge of other languages in their practices. So how we can leverage their knowledge for our EAL students, but also for the whole classroom, also for our monolingual English speakers that access our languages classes. And that's the first approach that they have to another language. Oops, sorry, I'm gonna... learning an additional language can also have a positive impact on EAL students' English. I'm not going to go into details, but there is research, strong research that demonstrate that when EAL students are exposed to an additional language, this has an impact also on their learning of English. And the plurilingual space of a languages classroom is enriched by the languages that EAL students bring with them. So let's see how we can actually put this in action in our classes. Just very briefly, I'll show you another set of brochures that you will find in the same website that are really, really interesting, very clear, very simple to support our languages programs. The next two slides are resources for teaching. So it's not very easy. It's not simple to find something that is could be relevant for languages classes, specific for EAL students. So I had a look at some resources that have been created not specifically for languages classes. This one, for example, is for English EAL classes. But some of the activities and projects that they present in this book are easily transferable and used in the languages classroom. They can be adapted for languages classroom. So I put a link here, and then you will have all the links also at the end of this presentation. It's a free resource where you can access some ideas on how to use or leverage the languages that our EAL students bring to the classroom for learning the target language. And the other resource that I want to share is, this is specific for language education. Again, it's a free little booklet where there are a few projects and activities that can leverage the linguistic knowledge and linguistic practices and literacy practices of our EAL students in the language classroom. I'm going to show you one activity from each of these two books, but they are freely available, and I think they can be a good starting point to support you as languages teachers to find activities that are relevant for your EAL students. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second. I think I bombarded you with lots of words. Just stop for a minute. So this first part of the webinar is all about sharing ideas of and perceptions of EAL students in the languages classroom. And I hope that these resources that you can access, in your own time can help you it can support you, because it's very difficult to start always from scratch, to create resources, and often when you are a languages teacher, especially in primary school, most of the time you are alone. There's not, it's difficult because all the work it's on you. So maybe these resources can support you in making choices in your teaching practices that are relevant for your EAL students. Any questions? Any comments?
Eleanor, there's been a couple of interesting threads going in the chat, and Kevin asked, how would you start with a student who has no English and no common language at all? How would you encourage them?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to talk about these in the next few slides. Okay. That's the trickiest, but I'm going to share with you my experience, and it's not, that doesn't mean that because I had that experience, it works for everyone, but maybe can give you some, ideas, or can give you some ideas to explore and experiment with your own students. Okay, I'm gonna keep going so I can get to that bit. So my goal for this second part of the webinar is to share ideas that can help us to recognize EAL students as competent language learners and language users. And the reason is, I have a double reason. One is we want to encourage them to participate in the languages classroom, because the languages classroom is a space where multiple languages are, valorized by default. Is a place where we speak other languages, not only English. And so maybe we can find a way to value the fact that they already speak other languages. But this can also be a way to enhance their participation and motivation and their self-esteem. And this can have an impact also on their whole schooling experience that, as I said before, sometimes can be difficult because they they actually need to improve their English. How can we, in our languages classes, in some way go around and use the target language to give them the motivation and the self-esteem they need to then succeed in the whole schooling experience? I'm going to start before I talk about how we can communicate and support students that have no English, and so we don't have any shared language to use together. Before that, I want to share two ideas, two concepts that we can use in our teaching practice. The first one is the concept of transfer. So the literacy development of multilingual speakers occurs in all their languages. Cummins in particular, which is a researcher in the Canadian context, where Canada is in some ways similar to Australia with an extra layer of complication. So similar to Australia because they have many migrants, maybe many migration waves, so lots of speakers of other languages. In Canada, they call them allophone, so speakers of languages that are not English. And the extra layer of complexity that they have is they are a bilingual country, so French and English are both official languages. So they have lots of research in trying to support speakers of other languages to learn English and French at the same time, but also to maintain their home languages. So that's why the research is very useful for us. And this research is about cross-linguistic transfer. And the main idea is, once we develop some concepts in one language, they are transferable to other languages. And Cummins identifies different levels of transfer. So most of the time we think of cross-linguistic transfer as the transfer of specific linguistic elements. For example, cognates. If I speak Italian, it might be easy for me to transfer meaning, concepts, specific linguistic elements between languages that are close to Italian, for example, French or Spanish. But this is not the only type of transfer that we can leverage. For example, Cummins talks about conceptual elements that we can transfer. For example, if I already know what a photosynthesis is in Arabic, I don't need to learn the concept in English. I don't need to learn the concept in Italian. I already have the concept. I just need to learn the words that help me to express that concept. There's also morphological awareness. So structure parts of the words that move meaning across. And one of the examples that he gives are words that end with the sound shon, like nation. That bit identify a noun with a particular characteristics and features. The morphological awareness can be useful, can be transferable between languages. Then there's the phonological awareness, so how sounds are produced in different languages. There's the metalinguistic or metacognitive strategies. So when we use our first language, we use some strategies that are transferable to other languages. For example, visualizing, graphic organizers, vocabulary acquisition. And then there's the pragmatics. So, for example, gestures. And as you can see, I use my hands a lot. In Italy, we do this. But also, for example, how we position when we communicate. For example, I don't know, in Anglophone countries, the distance between speakers might be a bit wider compared to Italian, Spanish speakers, where we tend to be a bit more, have a bit more of physical contact and all these sort of things. All these elements are already developed in some way in some of the languages of our students and can be transferable to other languages. And the second concept that I want to talk about is the concept of the common underlying proficiency. So what we see when our EAL students and our students speak is it's only the surface of the iceberg. We see, we see the pronunciation, we see the vocabulary, we see the grammar, but we don't see all these other concepts that sits under the water, under the tip of the iceberg, and that are in common between the languages, among the languages that the speakers has. But Cummins suggests or argues that to reach this level of underlying proficiency and for this layer to become usable and transferable between languages, we need to support our students in maintaining the languages that they already know. So it's better not to say, okay, this is the Italian space, we use only Italian, because otherwise we close out, we ask our students to, in some way, to not use what they already know in their other languages. So let's keep these two main concepts in mind, and let's have a look at some classroom activities that may leverage this. I'm going to start with defining two, how can I say, maybe, I don't know if they are assumptions, so some ideas that sometimes we have. One is, okay, if I let my students to access the languages in their repertoire, I need to know these languages. As a languages teacher, how do I manage this if I don't know the languages of my students? And this could be difficult, but we always talk about student agency, and this is the way, the space where we can let go a little bit. We don't need to know all the languages of our students. It may be useful if we have an idea of how these other languages work, but it's not essential. And we can position our students as the experts in their own languages without knowing them. As a teacher, for me, it's not easy because you have to let go a bit of your control over what the students are doing. But it's something that we can experiment and see how powerful can be for our students. And the other point relates a bit to to Kevin's question. Sometimes there's no need to use English as the language of instruction. In some situation, the target language could be the safest space for our EAL students. And I'm going to share with you my personal experience. Years ago, I was teaching a foundation class, so 5 years old students, and I had this student. He just migrated to Australia from Russia. I didn't know much about this student, but the first term of prep, I tend to not use much language, not much English, and lots of Italian, but in small chunks, not talking, just using the language in a functional way, defining through the language what I want them to do. And in this first term, I perceived this particular student as very competent. He was one of the students that you think is switched on. He was always participating. He was answering my question. He was putting up his hand. He was doing what I was asking to do in Italian. And at the end, in term 2, he disappeared from my class, and I asked the classroom teacher, but what happens to Gleb, what's his name? And she said to me, oh, it was very difficult. His behavior was very not, up to the standard that we needed. He was struggling with English, so we decided to send him to the English language school, which is, I understand, is, the move that you need to do. But in my perception, the fact that I didn't use English as the medium, as the language of instruction in that class, helped me to, in some way, overcome that difficulty that we couldn't communicate. To be honest, I didn't even realize that his English wasn't good enough, because it wasn't that useful. I wasn't using that much English in my teaching. So I don't know if this helps, but let's keep these two ideas in mind. Let's give students some agency in using the languages that they know best. And let's try not to rely always on English as a language of instruction, especially for these students that may not have the same level of English as other students. Having said that, if it was a grade 6, it might have not been, the same. So this particular condition was good enough for me to give these students enough language to be at the same level of every other student and demonstrate his competence in learning Italian. It might not be the same if I have a new arrival in year 6 and the level of the target language is already at the different, it's not at the very beginning. So that's one of the problems that we have to face. But I'm going to leave it for now, and I'm going to share with you, and we might go back and talk at the end, and I'm going to share with you a couple of ideas on how we can position our students, our EL students, as experts in the languages classroom. So on the left-hand side, I put some just quick points about what the research says about EAL students. And one of these, the research suggests that because they have extended the linguistic practices with multiple languages and because they already experienced learning languages before, they can have an advantage compared to monolingual English speakers. And the research says also that they have a bit more tolerance to ambiguity. So they are a bit more comfortable with not understanding everything that we are saying in the target language compared to monolingual English speakers. And we can position these as a resource. So their multilingualism is not perceived as a problem, as an issue, but we can try to use it as a resource. And I have identified 4 potential strategies that we can use. One is to explicitly use strategies for transfer in order to raise their metalinguistic awareness. The second one is compare languages. The third one is start from what they bring to the learning space, which includes also a multicultural perspective. And why these 4? Because I want to achieve 2 main things. One, I want to position my EAL students as experts, and I'll do it by using these 4 strategies. But also I want to help my EAL students to make sense of the additional languages, the target language that they are learning. Example 1. What I mean with explicitly share with them or make them aware of the strategies that they can use to make sense. I share with you an activity that Linton?
Now you're going beautifully. Just letting you know it's 4:30 as you requested.
Oh.
I do, that's all.
Thank you. So thank you so much. So one way we can make these strategies explicit, I created this poster with my grade 5 and 6, and I share with you one activity that I used to do at every single so we used to have 1 Italian lessons per week, 60 minutes. At the beginning of each lesson, I would share with the students on the whiteboard the learning objective. Today we are learning this and this, and this sentence was in Italian. We had at the school like a progression from prep to grade 6 on how to improve and extend the use of Italian for the learning objectives. So, but in grade 5 and 6, the goal was I would write the learning objective, and then I would use 5 minutes at the beginning of the lesson to ask them to make sense of that learning objective. Basically, I was asking to translate, but I didn't use that word. I didn't say, can you translate this learning objective into English? But I would say, let's make sense of these words using these strategies. Use your prior knowledge. You may already know some of the words that are in this learning objective. You know what they mean because we have used them before. Compare them, the words, with the languages that you already know. And this is useful because it opens from just comparing the target language Italian and English to comparing Italian with all the languages available. And it would happen that some students would say, oh, you know what, that word is the same as in Spanish. That word sounds like this other word that I know. Opening, a bit the classroom to the other languages, making sure that the students knew that they were allowed to refer to other languages. Then the other strategies were, using the context. We are working on this topic, so this word may be relevant or useful. You can understand the meaning because it's part of the broader topic that we are working on. Using other cues, pictures, gestures, my expressions, acting out, and work with others, sharing with others, reflecting, in partners. Oh, I think that this means this, or no, and then come up with the understanding of the learning objective. This is just one example of how we can use strategies that are explicitly presented to the students in order to make sense. This can be used in many other different ways. This is one way. I'm going to talk now about a few potential ways of comparing languages, and keeping in mind both goals: to position my EAL students as experts and to help them to make sense. This is an activity that I shared also in the other webinar, but I want to share it with you in a different perspective. In Italian, there are a few sounds that are not common in English. For example, the R sound, the N sound, the L sound. Some of these sounds are part of other languages. For example, the R sound is present in many Indian languages, Japanese. The N sound is very common in Spanish. The L sound is very common in French, and there are many other languages. I'm just referring to a few that I know. One activity that we did in a grade 5 class was they had to learn to recite a poem in small groups, but some of the sounds were difficult. So I organized the class in small groups, and in each group there was at least one speaker of one of the languages that had that sound. So the EAL students, maybe not very fluent in English, was the expert. Their role was to teach that particular sound to the rest of the group by identifying one word in this language that they would share with the group, and find a picture and tell them what the meaning of this word in their language, then use it to practice that word, then transferring into practice the Italian word, and then transferring into reciting the whole poem. This is what I mean with positioning EAL students as experts. Maybe that's one of the only times where they feel valorized for what they know and what they bring to the classroom. In the English classroom, might be much difficult for them to be recognized as competent language users. So we can leverage these in our languages classroom. There are many other forms of comparisons. We were talking about morphological transfer. For example, I learned that the characters for numbers are the same in Chinese and Japanese, but the words are different. So this is, if we are teaching, I don't know, the numbers, we may have someone they already know that morphological, that sign, that and this may be useful to recognize and make sense of the new language that they are learning. Another way of comparing languages is between gendered languages. For example, Italian and French, Italian and masculine. They already, if you know one of these languages, you already have the concept of gender that you might not have if you are an English speaker or speaker of a language that doesn't have this differentiation. Cognates. And I put this video, I bet many of you already know this video, but it's very interesting because we think of cognates only between cross languages. So as I said, Spanish and Italian, for example. We never think that cognates may be present also between distant languages. And this video is very interesting because there are two speakers, an Arabic and a Spanish speaker, and they say a word together, and they find out that the words are very similar. I'm going to play just a couple of words for you, just to give you a taste of how it sounds like. Oops. Tell me if you can hear or if it's clear enough. Okay.
Blouse. 1, 2, 3. Blusa. So similar.
That was cool.
Pants. 1, 2, 3.
Pantalones. How do you say it?
Pantalon.
Pantalon. That's cool. Pantalones.
Shirt. 1, 2, 3.
Camisa.
Oh, you're just saying an A after, so it's like almost the same.
Yeah, camisa. Camis?
Yeah. Sugar. 1.
Okay. I'm going to stop it. The video, you can have the link and have a look, but it's very, sometimes it's good to reflect on the fact that we have some assumptions and we think cognates are relevant only in some contexts, and maybe that's not true. We can explore a little bit further. And the last comparison that I'm going to talk about is the sentence structure and text direction. The example is in English, not in Italian, just because it's a shared language, but it would be exactly the same for Italian, for example. So the text direction in Arabic is different. We start from right to left, but the position of the parts of the sentence in the sentence is the same. So the first bit is, it tells me when. The second bit, it tells me, the subject and the action. The third bit is the object. And then there are a couple of complements, with whom and where. Same order. How this can be helpful? If I can let my students use the language they know best and help them to identify, or ask them to identify for me what the sentence says, we can identify these similarities or differences that can be useful in progressing with learning the target language. I'm going to share 3 very quick activities that start from what the students bring to the classroom, and then I'm going to stop. One is to use language experience. The language experience, I took this screenshot from the department website where they talk about EAL students. It's starting from not a verbal kind of input, but doing kind of input. So we do an experience together. We cook something, we go for a walk in the park, we play a game, we plant something in the veggie garden. And we use this experience with a specific linguistic focus. For example, we want to teach imperatives in Italian, and we use a recipe, a cooking activity. The way I can valorize the EAL student is through using word, allow them and encourage them to use word in their languages to make sense of the Italian words. To use objects, in this case might be a recipe, from their culture and family tradition. Maybe start from what they already know. And to use multimodal ways of explaining and matching, the meaning with the target language words. For example, gestures, but can be pictures, can be songs, can be acting out, and other ways of sharing meaning. One example is identity texts. Again, this is in English. Sorry, I go back. Just because it's a shared language, but you can imagine your own language in these little boxes. Start from an object that is relevant, is important for my student, and I create a little poem by using adjectives and nouns in the little box to describe the object. I don't need English, but I may need to support my EAL students moving from their home language to Italian or to the target language that you are teaching. And again, I use everything I can to support meaning, objects, pictures, acting out, drawings, anything. One activity from the EAL book resource that I showed to you before, there's an intrinsic project. You can go and have a look that can be easily translated into any target language. It's a project about sharing the meaning of your name. The name is part of your identity, and making sure that we can pronounce properly the name of our students can be relevant and can be a way to start from our students. So I'm not going to go into details, but you can go and have a look at this activity, and I think it's could be easily adapted to a language classes where students can start from how to pronounce their meaning and move to how to pronounce their name and move on to what the meaning of their names using their home language and the target language that we are introducing. And the last one, and then I stop, is an activity that you can find in the plurilingual booklet, and it's about using idioms or proverbs. It's a good way. This is good for more, grade 5, 6, maybe not the youngest, but it could be good for starting from what they know about their culture, and learning that using the language sometimes is not just translating single words, but it's about meaning. You will find a little video. This is a video created by TED, the conference organization, and it just presents a few idioms. But what is interesting is that we can again position our EAL students as experts if we allow them to share with the class one idiom from the culture or language. They can teach how to say it. They can explain the meaning. They may not have enough English to do this. They don't have enough target language, Italian or whatever target language is, to do this, because this is my goal, is to teach them how to use Italian to explain idioms. So I'm going to start from other modalities, from pictures, from acting out, and then I'm going to move into introducing the language that I want them to learn about idioms. This is another potential activity. Okay, I think I'm gonna stop here I'm not gonna show you the video, but there's also a link where you can, it's just a collection of lots of different idioms in different languages, so it can be a good source to use with our students depending on the languages they bring to the classroom. Okay, I think I'm gonna stop here because I'm aware that of time, but as I said at the beginning, these are just some ideas that we can share that I found or I experienced in my teaching practice, or I found in some resources. And it's just the beginning. What I mean is, it may be relevant for your context, it may not be relevant for your context, but I strongly invite you. I actually have a final slide that I want to share very quickly, where I would be very happy to continue the conversation, because maybe you have more specific context and questions that I didn't touch in this shorter webinar. Maybe you have ideas that you would like to share, teaching practices that you would like to put in common with other teachers. So my proposal is, you're more than welcome to stay for another 5 minutes and talk a little bit about this, or you can just email some of your ideas or some of your needs in order to continue the discussion about EAL students in the classroom to MLTAV, or even to me directly, and we can certainly keep this in mind and see if we can continue the conversation around EAL students in the languages classroom.
I told you she was a gold mine, didn't I? So, on your behalf, everybody, I'd like to thank Eleanor for an amazing bunch of resources and very well researched background, and from someone who's walked the walk. I think that was really tremendous. I love this transition to a plurilingual view and seeing our learners as a resource, and it boils down to knowing your students, doesn't it? It's really hard if you've got 40 minutes a week or something like that, but that's at the heart of it. So, Eleanor, many thanks for your wonderful work, for sharing it so willingly with us. And so on behalf of MLTAV, please have a look at our webpage. There's lots of other PL and our conference coming up later in the year. We would love it if you are able to join us. And now, if you want to stay online, you're welcome to do that for 5 minutes to have a chat to Eleanor. But otherwise, I'll close the meeting off and say thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.